Oh boy. So, Titans of the Tide. So nice to get back to you. Eventually. Yeah, sorry this one took so long, guys. You think I'd hit this as soon as possible since I am indeed kind of a big SpongeBob guy? I mean, my turnaround for the Cosmic Shake review was, what, a week? Meanwhile, a Titans of the Tide review took about half a year. What you gonna do? At least it's got a review. Don't worry, the Patrick Star game, you're next. No joke, I still haven't played that game. I own 2 versions of the game and I still haven't played it at all. Why do I do this to myself? But, okay, the subject today is Titans of the Tide. I already talked about this game in my Best Games of 2025 countdown earlier this year, and while it wasn't super high up, I clearly must have liked the game for it to make an appearance. And indeed, I do like Titans of the Tide. I don't feel as strongly about it as I did with Cosmic Shake, but it's still a pretty good game all things considered, and definitely among the better SpongeBob games. I still remember being completely caught off guard by this game's announcement trailer. Cosmic Shake came out in early 2023, and here we were about 2.5 years later with Purple Lamp announcing their next big 3D SpongeBob platforming adventure. I certainly wasn't complaining, but you gotta remember that these days, development times have been stretched to such an insane degree. We're waiting an average of 5 years now for 3D Sonic games. We haven't gotten a new 3D Mario since Odyssey in 2017. So SpongeBob getting such a quick turnaround was a pleasant surprise. I will admit that the relatively short development cycle for this game wasn't exactly to this game's full benefit. Believe me, I'll get into that later. But at the same time, said short development cycle also means the expectations aren't so impossibly high. That next elusive 3D Mario, it kinda has no choice but to be a banger for people to feel like it was worth the wait. But I'm getting off topic. I did rewatch that trailer recently, and I gotta say, it's a pretty great trailer. Cosmic Shake's announcement trailer was really good, but let's be real. Sweet Victory was carrying a lot of the weight, and it was all CG with no actual gameplay to show at the time. This trailer, meanwhile, is set to a sea shanty parody mishmash of Drunken Sailor and the Wellerman, sung by none other than David Hasselhoff.
Soon may the BFFs come to burrow, kick and jump and run.
Completely random to an outsider, but a pretty inspired choice for anyone in the SpongeBob loop. I have to wonder how much of the budget went towards them, but clearly they knew it would drum up a lot of attention from 20-somethings like me, who always have a place for the sponge. So fair play to THQ Nordic on that one. Now, let's start from the beginning. With death. Sorta. So in case it wasn't obvious from the footage and me constantly referring to Cosmic Shake, but Titans of the Tide is to that game what the SpongeBob movie game was to Battle for Bikini Bottom. It takes a lot of that game's essence and fundamentals and remixes them for the sake of creating a familiar but still new game within a shorter time frame, just so it can release right before a big SpongeBob movie. And seeing as I loved Cosmic Shake, that's probably a good sign. Control-wise, SpongeBob is right about where he was in CS. Double jumping, gliding, firing off bubbles, karate kicking, most of the good stuff that made him the most mobile and versatile he had ever been in a game. He has lost a couple abilities like swinging on fish hooks or utilizing the reef blower, but to me, this is more than made up for with the addition of a second playable character. Yes, we finally get to play as Patrick again in a big SpongeBob platformer. I guess it hasn't technically been a super long time if you want to count Rehydrated, but before that it was the Activision games. And if you only want to count not bad games, you'd have to go all the way back to what, Truth or Square when he was a temporary power-up? Either that or Creature from the Krusty Krab where he's actually a fully playable character. Look, the point is, Patrick coming back is a pretty big deal, and much like in BFBB in the movie game, he feels plenty distinguished from SpongeBob. He can still throw objects like the good old days, but he can also now burrow underground to access new areas, dig up goodies, and dodge hazards, along with a ghostly tether grab which reminds me of the Enter Beam from Sonic Boom of all things. I don't know why my head went there first. I've been playing a lot more Sonic recently, but I sure as hell wasn't playing that. Speaking of ghostly, you might have noticed that you're always being followed around by a ghost version of SpongeBob or Patrick. Part of the story involves SpongeBob getting Avada Kedavra by accident, and so it seems like Bobby is going to be out of commission for the adventure, but rather conveniently, SpongeBob and Patrick learn they can pass off the ghastly affliction to each other using their BFF rings. Super adorable callback, by the way. But yeah, at the press of a button, you can swap control between SpongeBob and Patrick. The future's now, old man. We don't need to hunt down bus stops or porta potties to switch off. Now we can just swap on a dime, and believe me, the devs take this added freedom and wring about as much potential as they can out of it. This game is chock full of solid platforming sequences where you're expected to chain together a big string of jumps, glides, air dodges, burrowing into geysers to send you flying skyward, grappling onto objects to make more platforms, bubbling other objects so you can move forward, and that's not even mentioning these magic lanterns that swap between blue and green energy that'll allow some platforms to pop back into existence and make others pop out. Sometimes you're using SpongeBob's bubbles to activate them from a distance, sometimes you're carrying it along a treacherous path as Patrick, and sometimes it'll add an extra wrinkle, like lamps that you have to keep up with or only stay a certain color for a short time frame. The point is, the platforming in this game is arguably the best it's ever been by actually being pretty mechanically demanding with just the sheer amount of abilities and objects you have to juggle while also optimally swapping between the two heroes. Maybe this isn't that impressive when you zoom out and compare this to the platforming in other 3D games, but for a SpongeBob game, it was doing way more than I was expecting, and that counts for a lot. And more importantly, it's just inherently fun and satisfying to get through these little mini gauntlets, especially later on when things start approaching that movie game level of challenge, and yet you're getting through so fluently. And for SpongeBob, where platforming goes, combat will soon follow. And in comparison to CS, I found myself enjoying these parts way more. It's funny because in my original review of Cosmic Shake, I said the enemy variety wasn't very good when it actually had about as many enemy types as, say, BFBB. Titans, by contrast, only has about 6 enemy types, but I found the combat way more fun in this game for 2 reasons: pacing and challenge. I never mentioned it before, but a lot of the tougher enemies in CS had segmented health bars that took multiple hits and could only be hurt under specific circumstances. You've got these jelly makers, which are basically the Duplicatotrons of this game, except they take 3 hits, and after each hit they knock you back with a non-damaging shockwave, which really accomplishes nothing other than dragging out a fight that much longer. Or these muscular jelly dudes that also take 3 hits to kill, except they can only be hit after they've whiffed an attack. Stuff like that only serves to slow down combat and encourage playing very defensively, since there's no incentive to play aggressive. Titans may have less enemy variety, but what it does have covers enough bases between numerous fodder ghosts that either go for melee or ranged attacks, and then a few bulkier, more dangerous ghosts. These guys take a lot of hits, and while there are clear openings you're meant to take advantage of, you can still hurt them at any point. And that made all the difference. I felt like I controlled the pace of the fight and could make things go even faster by making riskier plays. Reminded me a lot of what I love about the combat in the movie game specifically, which is a very good thing in my book. I still think the combat in the movie game is the best and most rewarding it's ever been in a SpongeBob game, but this is close enough where I'm more than okay with what we got. So the core gameplay, to me, is arguably the best it's ever been overall. But this is where we get into the levels. Now, I will say the level design itself is still very strong and even fairly distinctive from each other in terms of structure. The first level, Goldfish Island, might actually be the best one since the first area is incredibly wide open and gives you multiple ways of traversing the area, including the return of the surfboard, except way less restricting. And the later segments are considerably more linear, but really hone in on those platforming and combat gauntlets that I've been praising. As soon as the second level though, they almost completely drop this balance and go really hard on the linear level design almost exclusively. It's still very enjoyable, don't get me wrong, I just can't help but feel disappointed after getting teased with what seemed like the new standard this game was going to set for itself. Neptune's Palace at least introduces the bubble wand and magic jars, so at least it feels like it's throwing a lot of cool new mechanics at you, but then you get Atlantis City, which just does more of the same. I mean, at least it puts a lot of emphasis on the rock rolling in the second half. I guess that's kind of different. Jellyfish Fields actually does try and do what Goldfish Island did with the open-ended first area and becoming more linear afterwards, but it's definitely nowhere near as large or fleshed out. I guess you can say this level focuses on more vertical platforming and ice physics because you're scaling the mountain while the weather is all messed up. And then you have the final level in a Bikini Bottom that's been very much ripped apart by the Titans' conflict and chaos. This also is a contender for my favorite level in the game. It's just a very fresh take on the standard Bikini Bottom level, and I love how you get these flies of despair that teleports you to random areas, sometimes places that feel like random pocket dimensions filled with miscellaneous crap to platform on. It really adds to the feeling of you approaching a powerful universe-shaking battle when just a side effect of it are these little detours you're forced to take. So I need to stress, really good levels overall, but I know you were paying attention. There are only 5 levels. Debatably 6 if you want to lump together the playable prologue area and the Flying Patty Hub. That's just not a lot. This is a true story. I started recording footage for this game and my first recorded part consisted of the opening and Goldfish Island. There you ended on a boss fight, so I figured, okay, much like Cosmic Shake, they seem to be ending on a boss with each level, so that's where I'll end my recording sessions and start the next one. So I move on to Neptune's Palace, progress like normal. Oh. I'm in the dungeon now, that's pretty cool. I escape the dungeon and then start traversing through Atlantis City, and I'm thinking, wow, this level is huge. It's way bigger than the first one. I finally end up at the Poseidome where I fight a boss and I'm feeling great. Then I look at the map and realize I was already more than halfway through the game. Neptune's Palace just didn't have a boss to cap it off like every other level, and my mood soured a bit when I realized just how short of a game this was going to be. That's my biggest problem with the game. It's just way too short, and while I think $40 for this game isn't horrible, it just doesn't feel as worthwhile as, say, Rehydrated for $30 or Cosmic Shake, which is also $40, but it definitely has a lot more meat on its bones. Not to mention, those games weren't holding content aside to sell as DLC or a fucking season pass, good lord. Yeah, for $20 you can buy this game's season pass, which is mostly meant to tie into the Search for Squarepants movie. You get a whole bunch of extra costumes, but the big stuff are Plankton's Portal challenges, which give you 9 extra missions where you do some tricky ball rolling courses, play a few more platforming challenges, and refight some bosses with some tweaks for added challenge. And the Search for Squarepants DLC, where you chase Plankton for the formula and end up in the ghost world from that movie. Now, let me be fair. In a vacuum, these are fun for what they are, and do indeed add some extra content that the base game sorely needs, but on the other hand, each of these only add about half an hour of game time to the package. So you're paying an extra $20 for more costumes in a game that already has plenty of those, and about an hour's worth of gameplay. I'm sorry, but that's just highway robbery, especially these days when money is as tight as it is for the average person. At the risk of sounding like a Nintendo shill, I would say that the DK Bonanza DLC was way better and more worth the money than this. That was also $20, but Emerald Rush was genuinely a fantastic shakeup for Bonanza's gameplay. Its roguelike elements in tandem with how many levels you could play it in and the numerous difficulties gave it a lot of replayability. It's still getting limited time events that keep players coming back and testing them in new ways, not to mention it had its own cute little side story and threw in DK Isles on top of that. And keep in mind, the general consensus among people who played it was that the DLC was really fun, it was just overpriced, and the timing made it seem extra shady when it got shadow dropped like 2 months after the game had come out. So if people are that critical of Bonanza's DLC, I can only imagine what those same people would have to say about Titans of the Tide Season Pass. Safe to say, very little positive. And I guess while I'm talking about negatives, I should bring up how buggy this game was at launch and how buggy it still is now. Cosmic Shake wasn't perfect in this regard, but there was very little in that game that had me raising my eyebrow. The worst it ever got in my experience were a few tikis that didn't respect gravity, and the locomotive in the train chase not having any collision detection when you weren't meant to go there anyway. This game, despite being smaller in scale, had multiple moments that had me wondering if this game was rushed out and by how much. We've still got tikis that don't want to fall down, which, sure, isn't a big deal, but it's honestly kind of crazy that this still didn't get fixed between releases. Shortly after fighting my first ghost jellyfish, I ran into another one that seems to have spawned in but couldn't attack or be attacked. Again, nothing massive, but it seems a little weird to say the least. In the cutscene preceding the final boss, Patrick just straight up fucking bailed on me. I guess Patrick really wanted to embrace his ghostly form by going invisible so he wouldn't have to fight the Titans. It was pretty funny, but like, come on, guys. This one might just take the cake. We're on Goldfish Island. I open up a path to the next part of the jungle and then go talk to Mr. Krabs, and then mid-conversation, the ghosts with the ranged attacks start taking pot shots at me where they actually deal damage to me, and even knocked me off the platform to my death at one point. Thankfully, I respond right back where I was, but this in particular feels pretty sloppy. You can argue I should have talked to Krabs first and then press the button to open the gate, but how was I supposed to know that the devs would allow enemies to attack you from far away during an NPC interaction? Future Bailey, play that Some Call Me Johnny clip.
If you're in the middle of combat and you trigger a scene where the game sets up the next destination, you can still get hurt while you're totally helpless. No, that's so primitive. There's no... Knuckles, how are you doing that?
Huh. That's the second time I've referenced Sonic Boom in this review. It's not a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. All of this happened during my initial playthrough in early December. I proceeded to come back to the game in early May to complete the game, get the rest of the achievements, and play through all that DLC. And upon coming back, my game crashed not once, not twice, but 3 separate times.
What's that, Gary? You're hungry? Oh, there's gotta be some snail bites around here somewhere. You're right, Gary. I bet the snail bites here in the palace are extra fancy.
I don't know if the game got updated in a way that messed it up on my PC, and to be fair, after those 3 crashes and sending error reports with each one, it stopped crashing and played like normal, but I was still positively flabbergasted. The last time I had a SpongeBob game crash on me was Revenge of the Flying Dutchman for PS2. Apparently the Flying Dutchman just curses every game that he's a major part of, so screw it. Kill him. Never bring him back. Look, I really try not to be a big grump about technical issues because games are hard to make. I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for Purple Lamp for all their hard work on these games. But I also think it's fair to let people know when a game isn't as polished as it should be. Again, most of the stuff is pretty inconsequential, a minor inconvenience at worst, so just do what you will with this information. I'm just trying to be fair. I don't want to end on a string of negatives though, so let's circle back and talk about some more things I really liked about the game. I think the game looks great. I'll admit that the visual variety of stages isn't quite up there with Cosmic Shake or even Battle, but we at least got some new sights with the palace and the surrounding Atlantis city. The premise behind the game in particular was really exciting to get behind. Apparently Neptune and the Dutchman have met before in the comics under far more friendly circumstances, but let's be real. From the average casual SpongeBob fan's perspective, this is a dynamic that was never explored in the show or movies before, and having it be between arguably the two most powerful entities in the show is really interesting. I love how it started over Neptune getting to cut in line at the Krusty Krab while the Dutchman was forced to wait in line. It feels very fitting for these two to get into such a petty squabble that ends up spiraling way out of control due to the insane power both command, while still being too arrogant and irresponsible to realize how much damage they're causing. To be fair, I don't think the story quite capitalizes on this concept due to how short the game is. We only end up seeing these two share like 3 scenes together, but what we do get is incredibly enjoyable.
Me and fish breath here, will ya? You'll pay for that insult, Dutchman, as soon as these two pay for accosting us.
And the story itself has plenty of amusing moments and even a few genuine laughs hidden away.
It's bad enough that we're spending Father-Daughter Day on this dump of an island. Have you seen its kelp reviews? 1 star! Well, we're gonna squeeze the most out of that 1 star, you and me, unless you're looking for a 1-star kelp review.
Of course, my precious Father-Daughter Day it is.
Yay!
Change of plan. You two make sure we get on that jungle path and find me gold.
You got it, Mr. Krabs, sir.
See that you do, or I'm docking your pay.
If you do, you will hear from my union.
What do you... You don't even work for me. I ain't paying you no how.
Daddy, come on!
Coming, sweetheart.
One of the most low-key genius parts of Cosmic Shake was having Patrick always by SpongeBob's side as a tag-along, so SpongeBob always had someone to bounce off during gameplay, which allowed for lots of fun commentary and back and forth between the two. That element is back in this game, and it's still very entertaining. There's still plenty of fan service to go around, lots of customization options like before. It feels like the costumes in a SpongeBob game are just a guarantee from now on, and I'm perfectly fine with that. There's only 4 bosses, but they're all really good and only get better as the game progresses. Hibernation Sandy in particular was a huge highlight of the game, and above all else, that finale is awesome. That whole trek through the ruined Bikini Bottom was fantastic, getting sidetracked by those Dutchman zippers, getting dumped out closer and closer to the feuding titans, stopping off at the Fry Cook Museum to pick up the original golden spatula in order to stand a chance against them. In the process, you fight a huge mob of enemies, and you end up destroying everything in one hit to really sell you on just how powerful you are now. And finally reaching those 2 towering titans where you fight one, then the other, and then both at the same time. And not gonna lie, it was really cathartic watching SpongeBob really chewing them out at the end and forcing them to fix everything. In general, SpongeBob and Patrick feel a lot more like their pre-movie selves in this game, but this scene in particular was great. It's like I was watching that same SpongeBob from episodes like Neptune's Spatula and Born Again Crabs, just on a much grander scale.
Patrick, you hurt my friend. You're not a king. You're a bully and a liar.
He'd sell your soul for a couple of bucks.
I'd bet my soul he wouldn't.
Who do you think?
I'm in charge here. You two better start fixing things.
Do as he says, guys. You don't want to mess with SpongeBob when he's like this.
Yes, SpongeBob will fix Bikini Bottom.
This might just have the best endgame of any SpongeBob game. Only the movie game really comes close for me with that trio of top-tier Planktopolis levels, and even that gets tripped up thanks to those stupid token requirements. It's a lot to take in. In some ways, Titans of the Tide is a worthy successor to Cosmic Shake, and if we're just looking at the raw moment-to-moment gameplay, I find it to be a notable improvement. If this game just had, like, 2 more levels and was a little more polished, I probably would have preferred this overall. As is, Titans is sweet but painfully short. If you enjoy these SpongeBob 3D platformers, and especially if you liked Cosmic Shake, then this is still a very strong recommendation. I don't know if it's worth $40, but it is going on sale pretty regularly on Steam. Apparently, it's already gotten as low as $24, which I do think is a more than fair price at that point. Just don't buy the season pass. I have to imagine that either THQ Nordic or Nickelodeon forced their hand, but I really hope Purple Lamp never does that again. As for me, if I had to rank this among all the other big 3D SpongeBob platformers I've played so far, I'd say this is either my new personal number 3 or number 4. I really couldn't say right now if this is better or worse than the movie game. I'm sure I'll come to a more informed decision with another playthrough, but that can happen later. If you know me though, that's still nothing to sneeze at. These games are in my 7 out of 10 and above club, so I'm just happy Purple Lamp keeps adding new members to that club. Hopefully they can keep up the good work, but if they wanted to stop here, I wouldn't even be that sad. But only time will tell. And that's about it for me. Sorry that this review took so long, but I'm hoping this marks the death of my creator's block and a shift towards overall more consistent uploads. The next SpongeBob video for me will definitely be a full-on retrospective of the Patrick Star game. I'm probably going to start recording footage of that game within the week of me uploading this, so ideally you'll get to watch that very soon. Next time you hear from me though, I'll actually be talking about Kingdom Hearts. Not a retrospective, but a fun little think piece on a niche within that series. Hopefully you'll tune in for that if you're interested. Otherwise, thank you all so much for watching. This has been Baileyography, and I wish you all my very best.